In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you what I wish I knew before I started practicing witchcraft, before I became a witch. So do get yourself a nice hot drink and settle back and relax and enjoy. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me for today's video. I hope that you're well and safe and looking after yourselves. So this is a video that I've wanted to make for a really long time, and I just haven't had the right moment because I've been making VRs or moving house and everything's just felt very up in the air. But now I feel like I can actually sit down and talk about this, and I wrote out my notes really quickly. Actually, it all just sort of came out because I was like, yeah, this is important to know. This is going to be, I hope, really helpful for people who are either coming back to witchcraft after having a break from witchcraft, or if they dabbled as a child or a teenager, you know, and then they're coming back as an adult, which is kind of what I did, because I started when I was 11 and practiced through my teens and then had a break in my 20s and then came back to it. So it feels like I've sort of had that experience, and I hope that, you know, looking at it from that perspective can be helpful. But also anyone who is an adult coming into the craft now, also for friends or family or loved ones of people who are practicing witchcraft or magic and they're confused or afraid or scared, I hope that this might dispel some of the myths. I mean, this isn't technically what this video is about, but this is some of the information that I think is really helpful to know from the get-go, and it's not always something that you do know from the get-go. And certainly in my experience, because I was 11, there wasn't the internet and there wasn't social media, so there was a lot less out there to learn from. And I know now we're so blessed with all this fantastic information on YouTube and on TikTok, but there is also a lot of misinformation out there as well. So it's important to take things with a pinch of salt. And I think it's a lot easier to get caught up in trends and think that you know everything because you've watched this many TikTok videos about it. And actually it takes a long time to build up your practice and a lot of understanding. And a lot of these things that I have realised have come to me over years of practicing and experience. So this isn't really in any order. I wish there was a more succinct order, but I haven't really figured that out. So I'm just going to go with what I wrote down. So the first thing is that not everything that you read is correct or true or right or will apply to you. So there are some books that were published in the 90s that do have misinformation in them. I think that the publishing houses are a lot better now at ensuring they're not publishing misinformation or books that have literally just had the same information from older books recycled, rewritten and recycled and pushed back out again. And when I was younger, when I first started reading about witchcraft, I would soak everything up like a sponge. I still do to this day have to remind myself when I'm reading that this is one person's practice, but it is their tradition. It's what they do, it's what's right for them. And I think I really appreciate it when authors do say that, you know, this is what I do and this is what's right for me, this has been my path, and I empower you to go and figure what yours is, or make suggestions, you know, this could help you, or this could be right for you, you could try this, you could try that. But ultimately, whatever works for you, whatever spells, magic, ritual works for you and gets you results is the right thing, as long as you're not harming people, you know. And so I think that, you know, you can try out other people's traditions and ideas, and you can also try out things like Wicca, which is a religion and a tradition in itself, which branches out into different types of Wicca. You can try whatever you feel drawn to. There are some traditions within which you will need to be initiated and others that you will not. Just to be a witch, you do not need to be initiated, you do not need to be part of a coven. And just to be a witch, you can do that yourself. It is only in circumstances such as wanting to join Order of the Golden Dawn or become a Gardnerian Wiccan or something along those lines, a specific tradition where you would need to be initiated, and a lot of those are very different. There are also some closed practices, as I'm sure many of you are aware, and other practices that people claim are closed, which are not, such as tarot. That is not a closed practice. So it's ridiculous if you have been exposed to any videos that tell you that you are not allowed to practice tarot. That is not true. It is not a closed practice. There are other closed practices such as voodoo. Hoodoo is not exactly a closed practice, but some people will say it is a closed practice. I personally wouldn't practice hoodoo because it is not of my culture. It's not appropriate, I don't feel, for me to practice it, but I have learned about it. I do take information from it and use some of that information to inform my practice. However, I would never go out and say I practice hoodoo. It's not what I do, but I am so interested in it and I will learn about it. And I think also the gatekeeping thing, there is a balance between gatekeeping and cultural appropriation or spiritual appropriation, you know, when you're literally taking someone's culture and creating something and then selling it as if it were your own and earning money from it, and then gatekeeping when you're literally saying, no, you can't practice this, you can't practice that, you can't practice this. There's definitely a very, very delicate balance, and I think with social media some of these things have been sort of like thrown out of proportion and it can be misunderstood and misdirected. So you just need to do your own research really and understand what is appropriate for you to be practicing. And in most cases, you know, you can learn, you can read about whatever you like, you know, unless it is literally a secret text that you're not allowed to have, which you probably wouldn't be able to get access to anyway. Anything that's been published, you can read. I think that many folk from within those traditions would support people learning and want to educate people about their traditions, even if that's not a tradition they go on to do. And I am not suggesting that I am an authority in any way, shape or form by saying that, and some people may disagree with me, and that's also okay, because, you know, I recognise where I am coming from as a white, privileged, cisgendered woman. So, you know, again, I also would like to say that whatever I say is never intended to offend, and also I definitely would want to hear if I say something inappropriately, or, you know, if I've got something slightly wrong as well, because I am only human and I'm learning as well. So I'm trying to be as respectful as I possibly can when talking about other traditions. So that does lead on to the fact that there are different traditions, and there are many of them, and magic is not just something that people who practice witchcraft do, because there are many, many traditions and religions that practice magic, and they're called different things, and there are many people who would not want to be called a witch. So it's really important not to label other people, and you don't have to label yourself. Just because you're new to the craft, you don't have to call yourself a baby witch if you don't want to. If you want to and you enjoy that, go ahead, but also try not to point fingers and call other people that because you know that they're a new practitioner. I think that avoiding labeling anyone is the best thing, and I've been in circles before with folks who have said that they don't align with the word witch because they find the word to be triggering for themselves, and that's perfectly respectable, but they do practice things similarly to how I do, and I find that very interesting. And there's a whole spectrum of practitioners who will, you know, have these differing opinions, and that's beautiful as well, because witchcraft is a secular practice. It means that there are many forms that it can take, and as I said as well, different traditions, some of which are closed, and so you just need to do your research, do your reading. So I think that there are many, many sources that you can go to get good information. There are some fantastic teachers and practitioners online, especially who are very active in the witchcraft community online. People such as Thorn Mooney, people such as Kellyanne Maddox, and many other authors as well. Devon Hunter, Matt Oren, Keldon. A lot of these authors have written fantastic, fantastic books. I would count them as sources that you can go to for really reliable information. So as well as reading books, you have the internet and the community, and as I said, it's important to have discernment, but you don't always have to find what you're looking for in witchcraft books either, or spirituality books, because if you're into like a folk witchcraft practice like I am, reading around your history, your local history, folk tales, etc. of your country or your area will actually give you so much context for your practice. So reading academic texts as well, reading the work of Ronald Hutton is so, so valuable. I would really recommend that for anyone who's new to witchcraft or wants to understand more about witchcraft and magic and wants to, you know, gain an understanding of where a lot of these traditions came from. Those are some sources where I would really recommend you sort of start with. So one of the biggest things I think that is important to mention that I wish I knew when I started is that Wicca is not synonymous with witchcraft. It's much more obvious now. I think most people know that when they come into the craft, I think. But when I was younger, when I was 11, when I started practicing, that was not made clear to me. And all of the books had Wicca in the title when I was going to my local witchy bookshops. And it was very confusing because I ended up thinking that they were the same for a while. And of course they are not, because Wicca is a religion and witchcraft is secular, as I've said before. Wicca is also not an archaic tradition going back hundreds of years. It was founded in the 1950s by a man called Gerald Gardner, and it started with him being initiated into a coven in the New Forest, and he began the tradition of Wicca. And it's also a religion as well in itself. It's a recognised religion, which is beautiful, and it does have more formulaic ways of practicing. There are Wiccans who do not practice magic, who don't identify as a witch, and there are Wiccans who do identify as being a witch. There are witches who identify as being Wiccans, and again witches who do not, who have other religions such as Christianity or any other religion. There are also secular witches, atheist witches, satanic witches. There's a whole broad spectrum. But also I would just add as well that satanic witch doesn't mean that the witch worships Satan. I think there is a massive misconception around worshipping the devil as part of Satanism, which it is not. Satanism in itself is about sort of having an autonomous viewpoint and seeing yourself as the individual and looking out into the world and being a good person, doing good things. You know, it's got a very like ethical, moral compass and code built into it. Other than that, there aren't really rules. It's about respecting other people, and there are a code of ethics that go along with it, and many of these ethics are really, really reasonable, and I think most people would consider them to be the mark of a good person, these ethics. One thing as well I think is really valuable to know, that if you are new coming into this, and especially I think if you're young, that not all people will like it or want to hear about it, and that you may lose friends and your family also may not be happy about it. And that is just a reality, and it's horrible to say it. But there are a lot of people who have misconceptions, as I said before, who don't understand. I do think that educating people is really, really key, and that's why I hope that this video can serve as these are some things that have been misunderstood, and these are misconceptions, and you know, actually that's not the way things are. You know, that this isn't evil spells and magic. It's not about that at all. Witchcraft isn't about that. For me, witchcraft is a lot about understanding myself, knowing myself, being okay with being uncomfortable, being okay with delving into my shadows, you know, where it's safe to. And I would always say that shadow work as well should be something that people do when they are safe to do so, and with a therapist as well, if that is, you know, important for whatever situations or circumstances may come up. And again, that comes back to knowing yourself, knowing those things that hurt and trigger and upset, and doing that shadow work. You know, that is a hallmark for me of the witch in my perspective, and then for me as well. It's about understanding yourself and being comfortable with those shadowy places. And that doesn't mean that you're doing evil either. It's the opposite. It's about learning from your mistakes and your pain and your hurt so that you can move forward and become a more aligned, more spiritually connected and more heart-centered person, so that you can, you know, go out into the world and spread joy and peace and love, and, you know, become a more aligned, your highest expression, you know, to be able to, you know, be a good person in the world. And really that's what for me it is. But there is obviously spells and magic that go into it as well. So some people, as I said, will find it weird. You might lose friends, etc. You might find that your family aren't happy about it. And I will say though, with the exception of personal safety in certain circumstances, such as you feel unsafe in your family home, anyone who doesn't accept or like what you practice, they're not worth worrying about. They're not worth your time. I will say as well, if you are in a situation where you're not safe, then really considering whether or not this is something that you want to do right now is important as well, because you can practice certain things without any tools at all, because you are the magic. The magic is within you, and you know, you can do very, very earth-based practices with meditation outside of the home, practice that way for a while without having tools and candles or crystals or anything like that that might put you in danger. But also you might, if you are not safe, then it might be advisable just to put it aside for a few years and come back to it when you are, you know, to be able to read about it safely and not have that fear that someone is going to find out. So I think that that point leads on really nicely to not allowing other people to stop you from being the authentic expression of yourself, not allowing other people to stop you from being you and following your true calling, stepping into your authentic self. And I think for years I was doing that. You know, I was listening to other people. I was like a sponge, and I was very impressionable, and, you know, I was afraid to be me. And I'm so glad that now I am not, and I'm fully in my authentic self. And if people don't like it, that's their choice to make, and they can go and do what they want with that, but they're not worth my time. If they don't like it and they don't accept me, then I'm fine with that, honestly. So next up, I've written there are lots of different magical paradigms, traditions and religions, and I have already touched on that quite a bit. And so I'm finding that my list is kind of like a lot of the points kind of come in together. So I'll just mention that again because it's written here. You will find that your practice will evolve with you as you grow and learn and try new things, and that's wonderful. And I feel that it's really important to allow space for that as well. So try not to become so rigid in what you do. And it's nice to have spiritual routines and practices that you do, but those can evolve and you can change your mind as well. And that's okay. And that's beautiful, that's wonderful, and that's, you're continually developing as a person anyway. So as you read and change some of the things you're practicing, your practice is going to develop and some of your beliefs might change. You might sidestep into a religion or sidestep out of a religion as you're practicing. And that's all beautiful and perfectly fine, and that's wonderful for your spiritual growth and path, and I would encourage that. So it's not something to feel ashamed of if you find that a practice doesn't work for you anymore, or something that works for someone else doesn't work for you. Comparison really isn't helpful at all, and just finding your own rhythm, your own groove, and knowing that that is what witchcraft is for you, that is beautiful and magical and powerful and potent in itself. And you know, I always think of Kellyanne Maddox when I think about this stuff, because it's kind of what she always stands for, that rebel witch. You know, her book speaks to this, allowing yourself to walk your own walk and to experience that, and it doesn't have to look like everyone else's. It's the same with the rest of the craft as well. So when it comes to your altar setup, or you know, having an altar, or your aesthetic, and all of these things, it is the same. You know, really the heart of the witch is within you, the magic is within you, and that comes back again to being able to practice with whatever you have, and not needing lots and lots of special tools in order to practice and to be magical, because the magic is within you. Hello.
Wingardium Leviosa! You do that in.
Maybe. So my hubby just brought me wine, isn't he nice? Okay. Oh my god. Okay, so I have a video where I speak to how to practice magic with mundane items, and the first part of that video, well, spoiler, I will link the video, so if you want to go see it you can, but the first part of that video really goes into the fact that the magic is within you. You know, you make the magic. And when I was really little, I would make magical spells in my head, because I would create songs and poems, I would speak them aloud, there were incantations, as well as doing magic with sticks and dirt and leaves and twigs and berries and things. You know, I was really connected to the yew tree for a very, very long time, and I used to smush the berries in between my hands, which I would never do now, because the berry themselves isn't toxic, but the seed within is, and the rest of the tree is highly, highly poisonous. So it's really not a good thing, but I used to be like, you know, squishing these berries and making these magical things. And you can use nature, but you can also, it's all within you, you know, you just have to own it, feel into it. And I think one of the most beautiful practices for that is meditation, and I think I will make a video on meditation as well, because there's still this massive misconception about how to meditate, and that it's a hard thing to do, because it can feel really, really overwhelming. It can be something that you're like, nah, just like, oh, about, but actually there's nothing as potent and as powerful to bring you back into yourself, to ground and center, than meditation and breath work, and to bring you back and to start your magical practice with that. So, so powerful. So I think I will try and make a video about that. But my point is that you don't need lots of magical tools, because the magic is within you. You are the magic. You make the magic within you. And I think that's what I'm trying to get at here. As well as, you know, getting out into nature, breathing in that beautiful air, connecting to the trees and the grass, the earth, the plants, listening to the birds, you know, soaking up all of that energy, being in the elements, you know, being at one with the elements. If you live near the seaside, going and being in the sea and putting your feet in the sea, it's so magical being in one of those spaces that is so transitory, and it's a really liminal space, isn't it, being by the sea, because it's where the sky meets the earth, which meets the sea, and these beautiful elements kind of coming together, surrounding you, and so, so powerful, so, so magical. Breathing in that sea salty air is so cleansing and beautiful. When you think about the seaside, it's very like innate and primordial. It is really primordial. So you can let your witchcraft practice evolve and grow with you, and that's beautiful. So much of being a witch is about understanding oneself, being okay with discomfort, with going within, delving into shadow work where safe to do so, which is exactly what I said before, and I stand by that. Again, I will reiterate, if you're not safe to do so, please don't. If you've never worked along those lines, please seek out some professional support to do so. You can work with a therapist, a counsellor to do some of this work. But yeah, I would definitely advise that, because especially with certain traumas, experiences, life experiences, things can come up. It can be very, very dangerous if you're not prepared. But doing journal work, working with the tarot, those things can really, really help with shadow work, if you have sort of a little bit of experience there, or you know, you feel that you would be safe to do that. It's not all about spells and magic. So if someone that you know is getting into witchcraft or is practicing witchcraft and you think that it's all about them casting spells on you or other people, it is not. And again, it goes back to what I just said, like the innateness of being a witch for me is actually being empowered and being sovereign, being your sovereign being, and, you know, understanding yourself and being okay with that discomfort and going within. And that's a big part of being a witch. But there are spells, there are magic. Not all witches actually cast spells. Some people don't. And I think that the most powerful spells that you could cast, if you are someone who's interested in the craft and you're coming to it yourself, are the spells you create yourself. And I think that you can get some fantastic books that will inspire you. You know, you can get books that will give you practices and exercises to, you know, increase your intuition or, you know, develop your psychic skills and to meditate with and to deepen your practice, to deepen your knowledge, to deepen your understanding, to grow, to learn about history, to learn about different traditions. And there are fantastic spell books as well with ideas about spells that you can cast, you know, for correspondences as well. But if the correspondence doesn't make any sense to you, it's not going to work as well as something that actually makes sense to you. So you need to discover those correspondences for yourself. So if you're working with plants, you're working with herbs, one of the most beautiful ways to understand a herb is to grow it yourself. And I am not a great gardener. It's not something that's been innate in me. The way that I used to work with herbs was by cooking. I did a lot of kitchen witchery in my 20s by creating beautiful food. That hearth magic is something that's a big part of me, but I'm becoming better at raising little seedlings, but also just buying a plant. You know, if you don't want to raise a seedling, if it's hard to do so, buy a plant, nurture it, discover what that plant is about by sitting with it, talking to it, listening to it, looking at it, touching it if it's safe to do that and, you know, you're not going to hurt it, and connecting to it and, you know, asking it for permission to touch it, and doing the same with trees as well. Trees are the most magnificent, beautiful creatures, and they are just everywhere, and they give us oxygen. They literally give us life, and they are just overlooked every single day. You know, you walk past a tree every day, but to be there with that tree and to sit with it and to meditate with it, it's just so profound and beautiful. And again, you can do that stuff without any tools. So it's not just about spells and magic, but some of the most potent magic you can do will be one of those quick workings that just come to you. You just cast it and it comes from within. That magic bubbles up inside of you and just comes out, and it's just incredibly beautiful and powerful. And some of the most incredible results I've had have been spells like that. And I've never done a spell from a book exactly as it is. I've taken inspiration, but most of the workings that I've done have been just on the fly, and things I'm like, afterwards I'm like, was that even a spell? And then it manifests and I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, that actually worked. And also that questioning oneself, that's not so great. And so, you know, we all fall into these traps, you know, because we're only human, you know, our minds overtake us. But if you are new to the craft and practicing as well, one of the best things that you can do for yourself to be able to get effective results from your magic, from your spells, is to believe it yourself wholeheartedly and to not doubt yourself. So don't even entertain those thoughts when they come into your head, and instead of thinking, oh, was that even a spell? Was that even real? Counteract it with a really powerful, life-affirming mantra or, you know, intention for yourself that, yes, I am empowered. I'm an empowered sovereign being. I am a magical human. I am a powerful, magical being. I am one with the divine. The divine is within me. You know, all of those beautiful things that you can say, they will support your spell work and they will support your practice. So another thing, you don't always have to cast a circle. So casting a circle is traditional in certain traditions and religions such as Wicca, and some practitioners who are not Wiccans also choose to cast a circle. And I think in certain circumstances, if I was doing a banishing working or a binding working or something that I felt some spirit work or anything along those lines, I would probably cast a form of protective circle. And I certainly shield and put up wards around my home and around myself. I put up wards around myself daily, and I wear protective jewelry as well. These are all charmed. This is daily magic that I do. So I wouldn't cast a circle to charm one of these, but there is that sort of element of protective layer around me. But essentially, circle casting is used for a number of reasons. One is to kind of delineate a space that is sacred, to carve out a space that is liminal, beyond the mundane, you know, that holds within it the magic. And from a Wiccan perspective, building up a cone of power within that circle, then you can release the magic out of it and then you can close the circle off. But that powerful circle casting creates that sort of almost vortex outside of everyday life so that you can create that powerful magic and it stays within and it stays powerful and it becomes even more like concentrated. It's also a protective shield so that you can state what can come in and out. So when my children were really young, I would cast circles so that my husband could come in and out, so that the cat could come in and out, so that my children could come in and out, and I still do. If I cast a circle, I still make it so that they can come in and out, and so that I can go in and out as I need to, because with a young family, you have to be able to have those options, you know, because everyone has different circumstances and you have to work around those things, and there are ways to do that. You just have to be creative. But you don't have to cast a circle, and in many circumstances I think you don't need to, and if you don't want to, you don't have to, but if you'd like to, you can. And there are many different ways to cast circles, and I could potentially do a video down the line about that, but there are some fantastic videos already online, so you can find out online or find out in a good book as well. Lots of different techniques. You don't have to have all the tools or a working altar to create magic, and it is true. So these days it looks like you have to have this beautiful Instagram-worthy altar on social media. It looks like you have to have it a certain aesthetic as well. You don't. The way it looks these days is that you have to have the perfect Instagram-worthy altar, that you have to have all of these tools and this beautiful cauldron, an array of witchcraft books. And you know, I have a lot of witchcraft books, and you know, looking at some of my pictures, you might think that. I just think comparison really isn't the best thing, and if you're new on your journey and you only have a couple of books, that's perfect for you if those books are informative and they're good books, you know, and you're getting the information and knowledge you need, and you don't need to have all of these tools. And as I said before, the magic comes from within you, and you can cast really powerful spells, you can create potent magic and witchcraft and have a beautiful spiritual practice without any of those things. But you also can build those things up, and if you want to have those things, you can have those things. But really, you know, it's not advisable to just go out and buy them, because you might find that you actually don't want to use them. I don't have an athame or an athame. I used to say athame, but I think maybe it's athame. But I probably would use one in my practice now, but a few years ago I thought it's absolutely not necessary for me. And when I was a teenager, I never had one because I was still young and I didn't think it was really appropriate. My parents didn't think it was appropriate. I have several wands that I have crafted myself and some that I have purchased over the years. I have a lot of things from when I was a child, so crystals and such, and other magical things that I had when I was younger. I think you build up these things. You can also get past family heirlooms and things, and jewellery that you can use on ancestral altars or just your main altar, and those things can become really, really magical. I mean, we've got a lot of bowls that have been passed down from like my grandma, or my dad does woodwork, so he's made me a few wooden bowls and I use them in my practice as offering bowls, and like a wooden chalice as well. I also picked up some things from charity shops, from antique shops. I think sometimes you call them Goodwill in the States. Those kinds of places where thrifting, you know, where you can find like old cauldrons, old silver or brass chalices and such, old letter openers, things like that people use as athames. But you have to find your own way of it. You have to find your own rhythm. I think as a witch you can have whatever tools you want or don't want, and you have to understand your own rhythm and the way you're going to use them. Also, if you're a young person and you don't exactly have your practice out for the world or even your family to see, and you have a little drawer or a little box or, you know, a little travel altar or a cupboard. I used to have a little cupboard when I was a teenager. My parents knew I was practicing, you know, since I was 11 they knew, but they thought it was kind of a phase, I think. Kept it in this cupboard, and I dressed it with an altar cloth, and it was a little altar when I opened up the cupboard. And in fact, that is the cupboard that I now use as my herbal apothecary, which is so full and everything falls out at you when I open it. So I need somewhere else to store some of my herbs, but I think it's beautiful to store my herbs in there now, because it used to be my little altar space. So I used to get everything out when I would do rituals or spells, and sometimes I just get it out, you know, to light some incense, put on a candle, etc. But I used to also open it up and just look in there and be in that space. And it was a little magical cupboard. That's what I had when I was a teenager, and now I have several spaces in my house. I have bookcases, I have a bookcase of tarot decks, I have bookcases full of spiritual, magical, witchcraft books, and I'm an adult though and I have my own home, and so there's magic everywhere. And also in Rosalie's room as well, she has some tarot decks and little shells and rocks and things set out like a little altar space, and you know, I set them out for her, but then she moves things around as are appropriate for her. So I would even consider that to be a little altar that my daughter has in her own space. So, you know, whatever is appropriate to you, whatever works for you, whatever you find is part of your spiritual practice. You know, on my altar at the moment I have a tarot deck I'm working with, I have a book of Psalms that was my grandmother's, I have a statue of the Morrigan, I have my Morrigan oil, I have some crystals, I have my incense burner, I have a book, I have some leaves, some flowers, some feathers, some twigs. I had a sweet chestnut a few weeks ago. I have a lot of things that move around on my main altar, and that isn't actually how my altar is going to be. My altar probably isn't even going to be in here, and I probably won't even film in here. When we get everything sorted, I'll be filming in a different space, and my altar will probably be in a different space. But yeah, so again, massive segue, but your altar space just needs to be right for you, and again, that can change, that can be fluid, and that's beautiful, and allow it to change. It is so much fun to find these tools slowly, and also it's not practical, it's not feasible for most people to just go out and drop several £100s on these magical tools. So I know that there are those kits on Etsy, you know, these witchcraft kits, and if you want to get one, you know, obviously you do you, but I think it's so much more valuable building up your collection and your apothecary, you know, building it up piece by piece so that you understand what each piece is for and why, and it's a lot more organic and natural, and you know, it'll be more authentic to you, I think, if you do it that way. Don't worry about learning everything all at once. Follow your intuition, your heart and your gut. Again, allowing that space for change and growth and development, and knowing that it's okay that you don't know everything. I don't know everything, I certainly don't know everything, and I will never know everything about magic and the occult and spirituality. You can never read all the books, so you choose the books that most align with you at that time. At the moment, I'm reading around a lot of baneful herbs and poisonous herbcraft, essentially, because I find it fascinating, because I'm interested in those herbs. We moved into this house, it's a new build, and there is some nightshade in the garden, and I have just been drawn to it, and it is beautiful. And it is actually, I was mistaken, it is black nightshade, so it is actually not poisonous, it is not deadly nightshade, it is different and it is not poisonous. So I am quite keen to work with that plant and actually keep it in my garden, which obviously I wouldn't be doing if it was deadly, but I'm very, very interested in learning about these herbs, and I'm interested in making my own flying ointment. I've used flying ointments, I've made flying oils in the past, I've made astral oils and such, but I'm very, very interested about crafting my own flying ointment. So that's kind of the path that I'm on at the moment, but I've been reading around folk witchcraft this year. I've been reading more around tarot, because I'm always reading around tarot, always practicing with tarot. So you can have several streams. I would focus on a few things or just one thing at once and build up your connection to that thing, especially something like a divination tool. If you're drawn to the runes, work with the runes. Don't segue off into scrying or tarot at the same time, you know. Practice something and learn it and understand it and delve deep into it and actually practice it, you know. If you're learning about tarot, don't just read several books and don't pick up a tarot deck. Pick up the tarot deck and go with it. Just don't be afraid to go with it if it's what you're drawn to and what you want to learn. But give yourself time, because there is time to learn, and you will build up your practice in a really, really, again, authentic and natural, organic way if you follow what you're most interested in, most passionate about. And don't get overwhelmed if you find there are other things you're passionate about too. Just write a list. Just keep a list. I would say you don't have to keep a book of shadows, but I do wish I'd kept a book of shadows earlier, because it's something that I didn't always do in my teens. I didn't write down everything. Sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't. I was very, very relaxed with it, but I used to keep other diaries. So I have a lot of diaries, and I think a lot of my magical workings got put into those, but it's not easy to find it. And I wish I'd had a dedicated book of shadows from an early point. And even now though, I do find it hard to record everything. It is a challenge with 2 children and a job and, you know, a busy lifestyle at home to look after, and finding time to do that. And I have 2 YouTube channels, so it's very, very hard to find the time, but I try not to think of it as a chore, because otherwise then you don't want to do it, and just try and write about the things that I'm most passionate about at that one time. And I think it's easier if you craft your book of shadows in a way that you can be fluid, so you don't have a contents page, unless you want to create something like a grimoire. If you want to have like a book of mirrors or just a journal that you want to just throw things in, and then create a beautiful artistic book of shadows or grimoire that has sort of the finished spells, the finished results, beautiful sketches or whatever, or found art or collages, whatever you want to do with it, printed art, however you want to do it. You know, there are so many different ways, and some people think of a grimoire as being that final finished piece, and other people think of a grimoire as being more like a book of shadows and synonymous with each other. There's a lot of different ways that you can look at it. It's absolutely up to you, really, but I really would encourage you, just even if it's just a notebook, just a spiral bound notebook, just keep a record of what you're doing, because you can go back, if you have the date, what you've done, and you have some results, or you don't have results within a few weeks, you can go back and say, oh, I got this result. I actually found a journal a few years ago that I worked with quite a bit that actually had fields where you could write in what the spell was for, what time you cast it, what correspondences you used, what you did, and then the results, and even under what moon phase. And so it was really, really good actually, because it sort of held you accountable for writing out the details, so that when you came back to it, you were like, I did it then and I had this result, but when I did it then I didn't have that result, and also I used this herb but I didn't use that herb. And so you can sort of build up a picture of what herbs work for you, what moon times are best for working different things. Obviously there's a kind of consensus of correspondences, but again, it's working out what works for you. And there's this theme running through this video, I hope that is understandable, that it is about following your own practice, following your own journey, following your heart, your witch's heart. You know, I know it sounds kind of trite, but yeah, it is just understanding that your journey and your path is going to be different than every other witch, and that is okay, that is beautiful, that's what makes you you, that's what makes you magical. So go with that, embrace that, and be authentically you. If you take nothing else from this video, take that please, just to go with your authentic self and follow that, and don't allow anyone else to derail you. Not, you know, judgmental friends or scrolling on Instagram or anything like that, those comparisons. Just try not to allow anything else to derail you. And if you do find that that's becoming a problem, just meditating on it, accepting it, and being aware of it is a step to kind of alleviating that and allowing yourself to release resistance when you feel it come up. You know, the resistance is part of not wanting to face what's uncomfortable. So you face what's uncomfortable and the resistance will fall away, and then you'll be like, okay, actually I am safe. I am safe to just explore and to learn about this now, and I can record this. This can be part of my practice now, and I can try this dream working, you know, I can set intentions at night, or, you know, I can make this meditation practice part of my routine as well, and deepen your practice that way by doing. It's not always about doing spells, casting spells, or casting magical workings. It's about practicing what you consider to be your practice and your craft, and honing that. And it's okay as well if you practice something for a few months and you're like, actually this doesn't work for me, I'm gonna leave this, or I'm not sure if this works for me, maybe something else will work better, and then you put it to one side and you try something else, and then that way you're learning so much and you're able to gather what works for you and create and curate your own magical path, which is, again, as I said, so authentic, so beautiful, so powerful and magical. It is incredible. And that leads on to, nothing teaches you more than experience, and it's true. I know that some people say that you should study for a year and a day before you do any kind of magical workings, or that you should, you know, study for longer, or, you know, just a few months or whatever, that you shouldn't go straight into practicing. But I think personally, as a folk magic practitioner, folk magic is the magic of the people, and that magic was done in need, you know, in times of need, for things that there were no other solutions to. And I know in this day and age, most people in the West anyway have access to, you know, adequate medical care, and we should also be ensuring that we get that medical care. You know, magic is not like a substitute for any of those things and should never be considered such, and taking medication is important, you know, following guidelines from medical practitioners is important, but you can layer magical workings and holistic therapies alongside that medical assistance as well, so that you have layers of that. But one thing I would definitely say is that you can practice straight away, but there are things I would stay away from. Like, I wouldn't advise anyone who's new to start working with spirits or working with deities or anything like that. I would suggest a really good protection magic book like Christopher Penzak's The Witch's Shield, or Jason Miller's Protection and Reversal Magic, a book like that, and start practicing some protection magic. Start putting up wards around your home, start putting up shields around yourself, and feel into your energy. Start working with energy, start manipulating energy and grounding and centering. Those are the basic practices that I would always recommend first, and working on those like a lot until you feel so comfortable and confident that you can put up a shield in your mind instantly, even when everything is going on around you, so that you can put up a shield around your car right before you start driving, or when you're a passenger, you know, you can just put that shield up and you can feel safe, and that can be something that you're really, really confident in before you try anything else. And then other things such as like abundance workings, blessings, prosperity magic, those kinds of things are beautiful to do as well, as long as, you know, you're not, you know, causing other people harm while you do them. I think those kinds of magical workings are really, really good for beginner practitioners to try. And again, though, read and research before you try these things, and just go with your own pace. You know, it's okay to still be reading and learning, and you want to read for a few months before you practice, do that, but don't get to a point where you feel inhibited and scared to get off the armchair and practice. You know, practicing is the most incredible thing for honing your craft, and also helping you to feel powerful, because you get some results and you realize actually there's something in this and this works. You know, people wouldn't do it if it didn't work, and whatever doesn't work, it either gets honed and developed and changed and altered so that it does work, or it gets left and something else comes in that does work, and you try something that does work. And that's what witches and magical practitioners do. I said this already, the most potent magic is the magic you make and create for yourself, so craft your own spells. I would always advocate that you create your own spells, and even if you're reading several books, if you're a beginner, to get some inspiration, to write notes. I used to plan spells out in advance and write notes on the correspondences that I wanted to use and the tools that I would need, and you know, I would write out even what I wanted to do, but then when it came to it, the most powerful magic came out of my mouth in that moment, and it was spontaneous. It wasn't that I'd created this incantation ahead of time. Sometimes I had, but the most beautiful and potent magic had come from that moment, and it was spontaneous. Again, you need to believe it yourself. If you second guess yourself, your spell will most likely need some more honing before you see results, and this is true. So this might be one of the reasons why you don't get results from something. Even if you did everything else right, if you don't believe it, you second guess yourself, you might not get the results you want, or you might not see any results at all. So again, it's about honing, or maybe trying it again, doing a longer working meditation that you come back to, a working that you work on every day for a month or something like that, or a week, a 7-day candle maybe, whatever it may be. There are ways that you can work on your own mind, which is a lot of what magic is. That's what a lot of it is, that we're working on our own minds to transform, to create change in the world that we see, the world that we perceive, and the world that we create for ourselves as well, because everything on the outside is a reflection of what's going on inside anyway. So doing a longer term working that you come back to can help to get your mind into the position where you're ready to receive that abundance and whatever result it is that you're trying to bring about, that you're trying to manifest. You know, so if you believe that it will happen, it's much more likely to yield results for you. If you wouldn't do something by everyday means, perhaps don't do it with magic. So I think that, you know, this is again a general kind of point, but it sort of brings up the point of morality around hexing and cursing and where it's appropriate, not messing with people's free will, etc. Because love magic can be considered to be painful if you are messing with someone's free will. You know, love sounds lovely, but it's not something that necessarily is a good thing for you to be doing if you are trying to mess with people's free will. But some practitioners do it, and you know, that's not a judgment call. For me, I think a certain way, but at the same time there are circumstances that do, you know, call for more baneful magics, and there are practitioners out there who will do more baneful magics. I certainly have performed banishing spells and binding spells in the past, and I would do them again where called for. But again, exploring the morality around witchcraft is something that I think every witch should do, and it comes down to your own moral compass and your own will, and you know, you need to decide for yourself what your ethics are, and perhaps reading some books around that as well will help you to do that. But I think knowing where you are willing to go, and also understanding that whatever you do, you take responsibility for, and that's a big part of being a witch as well, is taking responsibility for your actions. So if you wouldn't necessarily do what you're going to do in a mundane way, maybe rethink trying to do it in a magical way if that's what you were planning to do. It's food for thought. And again, different practitioners have different opinions, and this isn't a judgment call. This is me just expressing my opinion on it, and a way that I feel that new practitioners could start to think about it, to start to explore their personal decisions around ethics and how they want to proceed in their practice along those lines. There is a wealth of knowledge about magical practices, charms and spells in folktales and stories of the culture of your land. So again, as I said before, you can learn a lot by looking into the history, looking into academic texts around colonization, etc. It's not easy to do, but it is really, really helpful, especially if you're working with ancestors and you come across part of your ancestry that might be problematic because of colonization, etc., and a lot of trauma and pain through that lineage. There's work that you can do with your ancestors to heal that, but learning about that culturally and historically can really, really help to inform your practice if you're working with ancestors. But also learning about folk tales of where you're from can help to inform your magical practice, especially if you're working, as I am, in a kind of folk magic tradition. So this is a really important one, and I think that I probably was quite naive. Just because someone is spiritual, just because someone's religious, just because someone's a witch, doesn't mean they're a good person. There are unkind people everywhere. There are people who are, well, let's just face it, pretty shitty everywhere. Wherever you work, there's usually at least one person who's pretty shitty. And just because someone is a witch or spiritual or religious doesn't mean that they might not be a shitty person. So just keep that in mind, that some spiritual people, witches, practitioners, are also not nice people. So don't assume that just because they are, that they have the same ethics and code as you do, and you know, they may not. So just be aware of that. I mentioned this before, but try not to label other people, and you don't have to label yourself either. But just because you identify as a witch potentially, and someone else does the same practice as you, but they do not identify as a witch, does not give you the right to call them a witch. If that's not something that they want to identify as, that's down to them. And again, the baby witch thing, don't call someone else a baby witch if they aren't happy to call themselves that. In fact, even if they are, if someone comes up to me and says, I'm a baby witch, I probably wouldn't. They're just another magical practitioner. And trying to see people, you know, as you would want to be seen. Again, that's a tenet of Satanism, just to respect others and to be, you're on an even playing field. Just know no one's better or worse. Just because someone might have more experience in a spiritual tradition or religion or area of magic does not make them a better person. They just have more understanding, more awareness, and they might be a good person to learn from if they're not a shitty person, you know? So just being aware of those things. And I think also, just because a leader or someone might have a lot of experience might not mean that they're a good person either. And if there are weird things that come up around free will and being forced to do things, if you're in a coven setting, that's a red light just to get out immediately. I've never been involved in a coven. I've been to circles, so I've never been in a situation, you know, other than being involved in a Christian church, I've never been in a situation like that where, you know, I've had elders telling me what to do. But I can tell you, you know, I've got enough religious trauma from being part of a Christian church and being part of that tradition. There are still things I've taken from it. I still have a spiritual connection to Jesus. This is something that I think a lot of people don't understand, and that's absolutely fine. I wouldn't really call myself a Christian, but I still work with Jesus and love Jesus. So do with that what you will. That's my practice, that's me. But I also work with the Morrigan, and I'm also a witch. So, but there is so much religious trauma there, and for a lot of people I think there has been that thread that Christianity has left with them, that trauma, things that have come up for them, and from the ways that they've been raised in Christian churches and the things that have been forced upon them. And I think that's not okay. In witchcraft that can happen too. I think that Wicca has got this unfortunate reputation for having those kinds of things happen when that's not the case. It doesn't all just happen in Wicca, and I think a lot of Wiccan circles are very aware of that kind of thing, and being more inclusive for transgender people and allowing for different paradigms other than just this binary male-female polarity, this active, receptive kind of polarity. It's definitely a paradigm and one that we can work with, but there are other ways to work with it that don't involve masculinity and femininity, and there's other ways to look at it. And if you're interested in Wicca, I would definitely recommend you watch Thorn Mooney and read some of her books. She's fantastic. I think a wealth of knowledge and understanding around Wicca, of course, because she's been practicing for a long time being a priestess. There's a lot of information there that I think that you'll find really, really helpful. I'm not a Wiccan myself, so there's probably some things that I don't communicate in the best way either. So again, apologies for that I'm not able to do it justice, but I don't want to speak for the tradition. I don't want to speak for those people. So definitely check out Thorn, because she's fantastic and just a really, really great resource if you want to go along that line or even just learn about it. So you don't owe anyone your story. You don't have to tell anyone that you're a witch if you don't want to. You don't have to tell anyone that you practice magic if you don't want to. Just because someone might tell you their religion, you don't have to tell them yours, and you don't have to tell your friends. You don't have to tell strangers. You don't have to tell other mums and dads on the school run. And if they find out, they find out. If they like it, they like it. They don't, they don't. Who cares? I don't really care anymore. I really, really don't. The only thing I would care about is my children being treated differently. But if that was to happen, then I would just take the adequate action I would need to in terms of like informing the school and sorting it out. I mean, I think that these days there's just no excuse for treating people differently because they have a different religious or spiritual view to you, and that is my perspective on it. And if someone doesn't like me, that's fine, that's their decision. I don't really care. But I don't owe anyone an explanation, and I'm not a bad witch if I decide to go somewhere and not tell people I'm a witch. You know, everyone wanted to stay in secret and in the broom closet, as some call it. You know, that's down to me. It doesn't make me any less of a witch. It doesn't make me a bad witch. It just makes me a witch who's not telling everyone what she does, and that's perfectly fine to me as well. So I decide, I make the decision about that because it's my practice and my decision, my choice, my will. You don't have to wait to learn all of the meanings behind the tarot cards to start reading tarot cards, and you do not have to be gifted a tarot deck. I just wanted to make those statements, as well as the fact it's not a closed practice. All of those things, just in case you're interested in tarot and those things are holding you back, you don't have to wait. You can start practicing straight away, start reading for yourself, start reading for friends if they're okay for you to do that with them there, looking at the book at the same time. You know, always ask. Obviously, you don't just start reading for people without their consent, or start telling them things that you've discovered about them in readings. You know, there are ethics as well when it comes to reading tarot, but if you want to ask some friends to be read for and they are happy to do that, then absolutely it's a great way to practice and learn. A daily practice could involve something like a meditation, a prayer, a tarot reading, devotionals, lighting a candle, breath work, lighting incense, cleansing your space, grounding, centering, quick spells or rituals for self-love, self-care, protection, abundance, all of those kinds of things. And all of those things have been and are supportive for me on different days. I don't do the same thing every day. But you may find that there are some things you do more frequently, there are some things you do every day. And again, as I said, it's your practice, yours to evolve and hone and curate as you see fit. And that's beautiful, and you should embrace that, in my personal view. There will always be more to learn, read and practice and experience, so don't fret, take your time, enjoy it, enjoy the ride. You know, as I said, this is your magic, this is your path, this is you, your heart. And if, you know, you watch this and you align with all of it apart from the word witch, you want to do all these things but you don't want to call yourself a witch, that's perfectly fine as well. And you do what is right for you, and you identify with whatever you want to identify with. You know, so many spaces are not safe for people, and I think that paganism should feel safe. I think everywhere should be safe, but for me, like, paganism, spirituality, witchcraft has been such a salve and a saving grace for me over the years as a young person, and then as a slightly older young person, and then as a even older young person-ish. This practice has been so beautiful, profound and powerful and potent for self-transformation, self-love, self-care, and it will continue to be, I hope and pray. And I think the best thing we can do is support ourselves and support our peers and respect everyone around us and what they're doing, and as long as they're not hurting or harming others. There is one more thing that just comes to mind that I did not write about, and that is the Wiccan Rede, and that is that not all witches follow that Wiccan Rede. Wiccans may follow the Rede, not all Wiccans follow that Rede, and it harm none, do as you will. Those things, or the threefold law, it is not something that all witches will abide by or follow. Some people do, and again, it comes back to the ethics, that it's something that you work out yourself. But I personally wouldn't want to hurt anyone or anything, any animal, any human. That is not something that's part of my practice. I think it probably is part of some people's practices, you know, because there are all kinds of different people. But to me, that is just not something that is okay, and it will never be. So with all of those things said, take what resonates for you, leave what doesn't. I'm sharing my experiences, I'm sharing what I wish I'd known back then and what I know now, and what I think is helpful for those coming to the craft as a new witch, a beginner witch, or something that hopefully is food for thought for family or friends of those people who are practicing witchcraft or interested in witchcraft and would like to know more. So hopefully this video has served to do that, and hopefully it's not too long. I really hope that you've enjoyed it, and if you made it to the end, thank you so much. Do leave me a little witch emoji in the comments box below if you did. I'd love to see that little magic emoji, witch. Thank you again so much for joining me. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like the video, share it with anyone who you think would find it useful, family members or friends if they are struggling to understand you, or if you're interested in this and you want to get some opinions from your friends or anyone else who you know is practicing and would be interested to learn. And if you'd like to see more from me along the lines of tarot, witchcraft, magic, spirituality and occult practices, then please do think about subscribing. And while you're subscribing, don't forget to hit that little bell notification, because that's how YouTube is going to let you know when I create and upload videos just like this. So thank you again so much for your time. I hope you stay well and safe. Look after yourselves, and I look forward to seeing you again in another video soon. Take care. Bye. Mwah.